Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. President Trump is meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, at the White House to discuss trade and the Middle East. Trump says a trade deal with Canada is more complicated than with other countries because of how close the two nations are.
It's a complicated agreement, more complicated maybe than any other agreement we have on trade because, we have natural conflict. We also have mutual love. We have great love for each other. I love this. I love Canada and the people of Canada. And Mark feels the same way about here. The problem we have is that they want a car company and I want a car company, meaning the U.S. wants a car company. And they want steel and we want steel. And, so in other countries, they're very far away. And there's no problem. You can compete and you can do. We don't like to compete because we sort of hurt each other when we compete. And so we have a natural conflict. It's a natural business conflict. Nothing wrong with it. And I think we've come a long way over the last few months, actually, in terms of that relationship.
The president said they will negotiate a trade deal that will be good for both countries. Trump hopes to bring down Canadian tariffs on U.S. agriculture products, and will also talk about U.S. tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel. Trump said he wants to figure out how the U.S. and Canada can compete in areas where they have to compete and work closely in areas where they can. For example, Trump said both the U.S. and Canada will be working closely on the Golden Dome anti-missile defense system that will cover the two nations. On the government shutdown, the president warned that he will be making permanent cuts very soon.
We have a lot, I'm not going to tell you, but we'll be announcing it pretty soon. But we have a lot of things that we're going to eliminate and permanently eliminate. One of the things that we have is some advantage, you could say. But because of the shutdown, which I think they made a big mistake, we're able to take out billions and billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse. I can tell you, I'll be able to tell you that in 4 or 5 days if this keeps going on. If this keeps going on, it'll be substantial. And a lot of those jobs will never come back. But you're going to have a lot closer to a balanced budget, actually.
The president also discussed the situation in Gaza on the second anniversary of the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack. He said the U.S. is in very serious negotiations and is very close to a deal. Trump said he hopes the deal would bring long-lasting peace to the Middle East. He emphasized that once the deal happens, the U.S. will do everything possible to make sure everyone adheres to it. President Trump met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney today, and joining us now to discuss is Mike Leon, NTD News contributor and host of the Can We Please Talk podcast. And we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent at the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. So good to see you guys, as always. Tony, I'll start with you today. And you heard in the soundbite earlier that President Trump was talking about how the Canadian-U.S. relationship is complicated. Can we get your comments on that? Is it complicated? Why is it?
Well, I believe that it's definitely complicated in a business sense, given that Trump wants to kind of reset the balance of power economically here among the North American countries. But it's also a little bit awkward because, we were just in kind of a grumpy argument, kind of a tussle with Canada over certain things. And so, things are going to be a little bit awkward as you're in the middle of negotiating some normalized relations on the economic front. That's why there was those little awkward pauses, kind of after some minor chuckles when he would say, we're going to get it right and get it back. And that's, we were on the other side of that a couple of months ago. So I do believe there is some economic tension. What he says, coming from a Rust Belt state myself, the economic tensions, especially in steel and manufacturing between the United States and Canada, yes, those are very real. They have caused Americans economic pain, but it's not something that you can just snap your fingers and fix because, as the president accurately said, they're just next door and they're a major economic trading partner in a lot of economic areas. So to just snap your fingers and say, presto, it's fixed is not necessarily how this is going to work. It's quite an undertaking.
Okay, Mike, what do you think? Is this relationship between the U.S. and Canada complicated?
First off, good to see you all. Tony, drop the impression. Leave that to the professionals here. Everyone knows it's so good over here. So good. But, I heard recently the Minister of Transport, Lisa Raitt. She was a former Minister of Transport in Canada. She was on a podcast and she said something to the effect about tariffs and Canada and the U.S. And she said, it's like being on a flight with turbulence, right? You have to sit on the flight. You can't get off the plane and you have to ride this out until it lands, right? And I think that analogy is really encompassing of what is going on right now. Look, Canada right now is at its highest unemployment rate in a minute, and 7.1%, I believe, is their unemployment rate right now. So Carney knows he's got his hands full. To what Tony was mentioning before, the two big industries that are highlighted here, and the millions of dollars that pour across the border from both of those, they impact both countries. Like, let's be honest.
Mhm.
I was speaking with a Canadian business owner, a small business owner from in the HVAC section, and he was telling me, kind of outlining for me the ways tariffs have impacted his business. There's a trickle back effect, right? Like, we see the laughing and everything that's going on today in the pomp and circumstance around two leaders meeting, but there's a trickle back effect that's being felt on both sides of the border. And to Tony's point, you can't just magically snap your fingers and put that all back into place. It is a turbulent flight right now. It's been upended after USMCA is set to expire. So now we have to figure out how this trade agreement will be, and all while knowing that this is our neighbor. Like, this is somebody that people live on this side of the border and then work in Canada and vice versa, especially on the New York side, for example. So there's a lot to it, and it's a little bit more complicated than we're leading on.
So, Tony, I don't remember previous presidents saying that this relationship between Canada and the U.S. is complicated. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but what do you think each side is trying to get out of this meeting right now?
Well, Bill Clinton did famously in 1998 make it clear that Canada had been treated far too kindly with American economic passes. Was one of the only comments economically that was ever pointed out by the president. Usually, that's left to the Secretary of Commerce in the Obama administration, for example. But as far as the Canadian relationship with the United States, it's got different facets. Again, the United Kingdom is famous for this. We've had very different relations with, for example, the State Department of the United Kingdom, the Trade Ministry of the United Kingdom, and then, of course, the military alliance between the United States and the United Kingdom. Canada's the same way. They're our little brother. No one messes with them militarily. I don't think so. But at the same time, we do need to iron out some of these economic, as much as I am loath to use the word imbalances, that do not, in fact, benefit all individuals on every side of, or on both sides of the border here. The issue that I think is at hand here is that once you start taking things apart, you find other things are broken. I replaced a well pump switch in my house this morning. It was a delightful experience. And I found something broken in the process of replacing it. That's a lot what this economic negotiation with Canada is proceeding through. The way that steel and aluminum tariffs, and on both sides of the aisle, those kind of trigger mechanisms that set into place, those are very outdated and set for a very different kind of manufacturing environment when they were put into place. And so, again, Trump being kind of the bull in the China shop, he's breaking things in order to fix them. That's his style. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes that turbulence that Mike alluded to, that the former transportation minister of Canada had said, I think that's accurate here. And I think that we are coming out of that turbulence. It's just what the deal looks like on the other side in the new manufacturing economy that I'm still looking to see whether or not I like it or not.
So, Mike, do you think that turbulence has eased a bit since Carney came to power? How would you describe the tone of the meeting today?
Well, I mean, you got to take out some of the dumb things. I'm not going to do. Maybe I'll do the impression right now. With a hot country right now. We're so hot. A lot of people say we're so hot. I mean, you can't quantify how hot we are, right? But I do think that Carney coming here. I think this is his third time that they've met. The second time coming here to the U.S. If I'm not mistaken, they met at one of the NATO summits as well. That wasn't here in the U.S. But I think it's symbolic of Carney coming here and saying, like, we're at an impasse because Canada is starting to feel it. And I mentioned this before about the former transport minister, but like I've been listening to, Don, a lot of Canadian podcasts to kind of find out more about what's going on up there. And they know that who holds the cards in the relationship. Like, let's be honest. Like I just mentioned, 3.6 billion Canadian dollars that flow into Canada from the business that we do with them. So, and the fact that the unemployment rate is starting to go a little bit higher now, Carney knows that he has to come a little bit hand in hat, but also with an understanding, like to Tony's point, that there can't be a quick Band-Aid to this. The USMCA lasted 5 years. NAFTA was what, 9 years, 10 years? My math sucks right now. Maybe a little bit longer, so you can correct me on that. I think it was a little bit longer. But there has to be something that's set framework-wise that doesn't impact Canadian business owners and doesn't impact U.S. business owners. And to the bull in China shop analogy that Tony gave, it is true right now. Trump has, we've said this numerous times, he's used tariffs as leverage. He wants people to come over here, grovel. That way he can publicly show his base, hey, look, I'm telling them to build here in America, buy here in America, like we're going to do it here in America, or they're going to pay this exorbitant fee. And I think we're starting to see with Canada, there's actual real impact happening right now with respect to some
Mm,
businesses, some
mhm.
automotive shops starting to close in Canada. Like they're starting to feel that impact. So he's using it to his advantage. It is a bull in a china shop thing because now the glass is broken. Now we've got to figure out how do we put this back together. Do we even want to put this back together, or do we even want to buy a new set altogether? In continuing with the analogy.
Okay, Tony, I want to ask you this as well. How do you think Trump's talk of making Canada the 51st state, how does that fit into the picture?
Well, for those of us who have kind of a long form view of history instead of reacting to every single word out of the president's mouth, it was very clear. And by the way, as someone who would have no problem with Alberta seceding from Canada and joining the Union, North Indiana, as it were, no, I don't think Canada as the 51st state was ever some extremely big, serious negotiation tactic. I think he said that to draw a clear line of frustration from Trudeau and then from Carney. It does benefit Trump to have Carney being the one that he negotiated with, given that Pierre Poilievre would have been a much more Canada first, willing to take it on the chin style negotiator. Whereas I think that Carney here is in a really difficult position and essentially does have to, as Mike accurately put it, kind of grovel a bit. And this is the real rub. This is the real issue with economic deals that is going to make people a little uncomfortable. There is no everyone wins game where we all dance around in a field of flowers. We're not to that point yet. I know Ezra Klein on the left and his abundance style of economics, kind of the classic Tea Party right, is also in favor of that type of abundance economics. We're not there yet to the point where the resources are flowing so freely that everyone's a winner. And so for the next 10 years, as you do repair the economic system that it was hollowed out by the mass manufacturing being shipped out of the country and new economies taking its place, not even having sure footing yet, the education system being rather broken to prepare people for an economy that really no longer exists. Well, that means that if we just set up the US Canadian relationship to be just the way it always has been, then it is going to unfairly benefit Canadians when Americans hold the cards. And I'm sorry that that has to be said. I'm electing leaders to serve my best interest first. My father lost his job in the '08 ship off of jobs, and Mexico benefited from NAFTA policy. You can say, well, but on principle, it's really wonderful. And maybe it is in theory, but this isn't in theory, it's in practice. There's a lot more factors to economics, there's a lot more factors to trade and manufacturing. This is something that I think Mike and I articulate really well when we come on these segments. There are a lot of nuances to these policies that aren't as easy as just slapping a campaign slogan or a band-aid on something and getting the kumbaya experience that every campaign, regardless of party, promises. And I think you're seeing that borne out in these negotiations. That's why they sound different every time. And that's why, even though maybe very extravagant statements like, ooh, the 51st state being Canada are proposed, long term people who pay attention to these things and keep an eye on them, they weren't really mussed or fussed. They were just like, he's posturing. And lo and behold, he was posturing.
Okay, so Mike, Trump is doing what he set out to do in his campaign promises, right? Make America first.
He is. I mean, again, I look. There are a lot of other pundits that will go on TV and they won't give the president credit for anything. I would love to happily join them in certain instances, but then there are certain times where, if, like, for example, Israel and Gaza, this 20-point plan, I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but I know we may wander here. But if he solves a conflict in the Middle East that is thousands of years old and a land dispute for all intent and purpose, I mean, you have to give the person credit for that, especially when other people in the region are giving him credit for that. So to answer your broader question, and one thing Tony said there that I want to piggyback on, Don, that's very important in all this is he's right about Carney winning the prime minister seat, because I think the poke was always at Trudeau, and that's why Trudeau went to, if you remember, when Trump won, he went to Mar-a-Lago. I think he was the first world leader to go to Mar-a-Lago right afterwards. He was always poking at Trudeau, but Carney stepping in, who again has an economics background. I mean, there's nobody better to lead if you if you're going to want to navigate the turbulence of these economic flights, for the
Yeah, bring in the
analogy.
banker.
You want Mark Carney. Yeah, you want Mark Carney being, either pilot or co-pilot in this. And I think Canada
Well
has
said.
somebody in there that understands that. And I also think that Trump knows Carney's background. And I'm not sure if they've ever had any business dealings together, but they know each other and they know their background. They know what they bring. And Tony and I, he said it again, I'll echo it. It's about explaining how these policies affect every day, whether it be Americans and in this case, Canadians. And Tony giving that example of jobs being shipped off, wherever the policy nets out, somebody will lose from this, right? There's always sometimes a winner, sometimes a loser. And so there'll always be that with respect to this negotiation, which is why we need to understand that. And I think you saw a different tone. I thought, outside of the joking, outside of the America's a hot country or whatever, I think you saw a different tone when the two of them were talking about the relationship. And I thought Trump actually summarized it pretty well about like, we have natural, interests that conflict, but we love each other. I love Canada. So
Accurate.
I thought it was a different tone this time for sure.
Okay, so Tony, I understand your position that the president should prioritize Americans, America first policy, right? But you need to balance that with your having your allies, right? So what is the appropriate approach where you don't isolate yourself?
The fun dance between the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of the Treasury, and then your Secretary of State, because we don't want to push Canada into communist China's arms. We don't want to push any country into communist China's arms. They are the worst, underlined, bolded, italicized, and I don't want to see China allow itself any more room to grow as some kind of a pseudo moldy global hegemon amid its failing economy and culture. And then I see the Trump administration here, I do believe, kind of playing kind of the pre-World War I America revitalization with the United Kingdom, which is that, yeah, we have our disagreements, but there are bigger lions prowling around on the world stage that it's within our interest to take care of. And Trump, it's not the first time he said that. I know that he said that in the NATO meeting that Mike, of course, alluded to a little bit earlier. And he said that even amid the economic strife, he said, look, nobody's going to touch Canada. And the Golden Dome manufacturing idea, or at least the increasing of the United States Aegis missile defense systems and the THAAD missile defense systems, et cetera, drone countermeasures. Yes, Canada definitely needs to benefit from that as well. And so in this kind of new global ally structure, we do need to determine how we create an economic imbalance that is as minimal in its imbalance as possible to benefit Canada, because we do want Canada to grow, because then when they grow, they can buy more US stuff, the industry increases, and you do see a larger net amount of happiness and a smaller net amount of people who do lose long term. That's the abundance policy to work to. But at the same time, yeah, if we're talking about allies or countries that will get less while the US gets more, I would prefer to see Canada be as close to the United States in that net balance of fairness as possible, because, yeah, Beijing should not benefit off of a failed economic alliance, maybe would be the way to say it, between the US and Canada.
Well, all right, I think we can leave the conversation here for this week. It's always fun to talk to you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
And Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared on Capitol Hill today to take questions from senators. Judiciary Chair Chuck Grassley focused on new evidence of what he called political weaponization under the Biden administration. Here's Grassley.
Was Attorney General, on the same subject, was Attorney General Garland, Director Wray, and or President Biden's White House aware of the FBI targeting Republican senators? Did they approve it? Now let's be clear, either they knew and allowed it to happen, or they didn't know. And if they didn't know, it points to a lack of oversight of Jack Smith's runaway case.
Chairman Grassley, that's what we've been talking about when we refer to the weaponization of government. Operation Arctic Frost was an unconstitutional, undemocratic abuse of power. During Arctic Frost, the FBI also placed 92 linked Republican individuals and Republican groups, such as Charlie Kirk's Turning Point, on their list. This is the kind of conduct that shattered the American people's faith in our government, as I said in my opening statement. We are ending this weaponization. Our FBI is targeting violent criminals, child predators, and other lawbreakers, not sitting senators who happen to be from the wrong political party. Several of your colleagues sitting at this dais were targeted, and others. We will continue to stop that. throughout the Justice Department. That is the ultimate weaponization of government.
Bondi stressed in the opening statement that the Justice Department has two main goals under her leadership: to end the weaponization of government and fight violent crime. She said the department has made tremendous progress towards those ends. The Attorney General clashed with Democratic senators over the Epstein files and the deployment of the National Guard to Chicago. Here's Senator Dick Durbin.
Why do you want to keep this secret? The American people don't know the rationale behind the deployment of National Guard troops in my state. The word is, and I think it's been confirmed by the White House, they are going to transfer Texas National Guard units to the state of Illinois. What's the rationale for that?
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
Been on this committee for more than 20 years. That's the kind of testimony you expect from this administration. A simple question as to whether or not they had a legal rationale for deploying National Guard troops becomes grounds for a personal attack. I think it's a legitimate question.
Bondi referred to Chicago's high crime rate and sanctuary policies, saying the city is sheltering illegal immigrant criminals and gangs. She said the Trump administration is going into cities like Chicago to make these places safe, whether they want it or not. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has the details of the hearing.
Even when the government is otherwise shut down because of the Democrats, the department's law enforcement officers and prosecutors are hard at work fighting crime, keeping our streets safe, and protecting you from the threats, foreign and domestic.
The main focus of today's hearing was Operation Arctic Frost. Senator Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, released additional information on an FBI operation during the previous administration that spied on at least 50 conservative groups, and now we've learned that it also spied on at least 8 Republican lawmakers.
As to ending the weaponization of justice, we learned that former FBI secretly investigated you and your colleagues. Why? They wanted to take President Trump off the playing field. They were playing politics with law enforcement powers and will go down as a historic betrayal of public trust.
Democratic lawmakers defended the Biden administration, while Republican senators outlined the numerous cases where the Department of Justice under the previous administration was weaponized against conservatives and in favor of Democrats.
President Biden retained President Trump's FBI Director Christopher Wray, who President Trump then fired. President Biden never directed the Attorney General to prosecute his political opponents. President Biden never fired his own political appointees for refusing to prosecute his targets.
So they pre-bunked the Hunter Biden laptop story. The American people should have been allowed to make their own judgments from that. Said it was Russian disinformation. We've heard that before. After Joe Biden comes in, 3 days in, they start a censorship campaign against the country, anybody who's a conservative.
Attorney General Pam Bondi also defended the Department of Justice's record in abiding with lower court orders despite the unprecedented number of injunctions fired by lower courts against the Trump administration.
We've been sued more than 400 times since January 20th. Judges have issued more than 90 temporary restraining orders against us, more than the previous several administrations combined. Despite the unprecedented degree of activism we've seen from the lower courts, we have never ignored a court order. And why would we? We have secured a historic 22 victories at the Supreme Court alone, with more to come.
Attorney General Pam Bondi confirmed that an investigation has been opened on Arctic Frost after whistleblower allegations that the FBI was spying on conservative activists and conservative lawmakers under the Biden administration for political purposes. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Meanwhile, mediators are working to implement President Trump's peace plan for Gaza Strip. Qatar's foreign ministry says many details still have to be worked out, but all parties involved want to stick with Trump's plan.
All parties have agreed to this plan, so there are no obstacles now in terms of agreeing to the 20 points contained in President Trump's plan. The obstacles now are in implementation.
The spokesperson added that Qatar is neither optimistic nor pessimistic about the outcome of the negotiations so far. A spokesperson for Hamas says the terrorist group is also committed to Trump's plan, so the fighting in Gaza can't stop. Germany's foreign minister confirmed that he sees willingness on all sides to implement the points outlined by the president. The German minister is among the officials in Egypt today working out the details of the possible ceasefire. Trump's plan is widely seen as the most promising yet for ending the Israel-Hamas war, which started exactly 2 years ago. There has been a rise of anti-Semitic attacks since the October 7th attack by Hamas. Joining us now to discuss is Trevor Loudon, an author, filmmaker, and public speaker. For more than 30 years, he has researched Marxist movements as well as the influence of the Chinese Communist Party. So, Trevor, it's always to have you on the show. So, a new report shows that there were nearly 2,000 anti-Semitic incidents in the first half of 2024, with a spike following the October 7th Hamas attack. Why do you think this is happening? What is causing this to happen?
Well, it's been driven by several things, and obviously the events in the Middle East are a big part of this. Now, what is happening here is the Chinese, the Iranians, the Qataris, and the Russians want to bring down Israel. And so they are amping up their propaganda operations in the United States, in Western Europe, every bit of anti-Israeli propaganda they can possibly come up with, that Israel killed Charlie Kirk, that Israel is deliberately shooting people coming for food aid. All of these propaganda points are being amped up, and you'll find the sources of them are basically Qatari-backed websites, Russian-backed websites, Iranian-backed websites, etc. And they have targeted heavily, especially American conservatives, because the goal is to split America away from Israel so that Israel can be more effectively destroyed, more quickly destroyed. That's really the bottom line here.
Okay, so the report is also highlighting a surge in incidents on campuses and in schools as well. Why do you think that is?
Well, you're seeing this coming through TikTok. I had a report from a teenage friend in New Zealand the other day telling me about how her friends are all anti-Jewish now. They're all anti-Israel because they get this propaganda on TikTok and other social media things. We've also seen the big upsurge in campuses of, very militant radicalism in the last 2 years. Unite, which is an alliance of local communist groups, plus Islamist groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, the Palestine Youth Movement, etc. So there's a very strong propaganda campaign for the left, which is coming out through social media, through TikTok, etc., to make people hate Jews, hate Israel, etc. And there's another campaign coming mainly from Russia and Iran to get conservatives to also despise Jews and Israel by spreading malicious rumors, unbacked accusations, and downright lies. This is probably one of the biggest propaganda campaigns we've seen in the world, actually, aimed at Israel right now. And it's been done through social media, driven by foreign actors, particularly Russia, China, Iran, and Muslim Brotherhood type operations.
So, Trevor, you're saying these anti-Semitic incidents is a result of propaganda, whether it's from China or another country. Would it be correct to say that then these incidents are not actually organic, in the sense that if we didn't get propaganda from China, then these events in the Middle East would not translate into anti-Jewish sentiments in Western societies?
100%. This is a deliberate policy to stir up hatred against Israel, to divide Israel from its Western allies, to isolate Israel. Very, very similar to what was done to Ukraine, actually, but this is probably maybe even a bigger scale. But 100%, you can trace this stuff coming from Russian-backed websites. You can trace it coming from Iranian-backed websites. All these memes that are floating around, the famous meme that Israel had Charlie Kirk killed. Well, you can trace it all back to Russian websites, but it is amplified by mainstream American, by American conservatives and others, without much fact checking going on. But that is the origin of the stuff. It's no accident that October 7th is Putin's birthday right now today, and that Hamas called Vladimir Putin their best friend. This is no accident whatsoever.
Can you put this level of anti-Semitic incidents into perspective for us? How does it compare historically?
Well, it's really, we haven't seen this since World War II. This is happening in every Western country, but particularly Western Europe and the United States. There's a massive campaign harnessing, there's always been this undercurrent of anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish feeling in certain countries, and that's been amplified. But what is happening now, it has been pushed into American and Western conservative movements who've traditionally been pro-Israel. And you're finding it also seeping into the American evangelical movement, which has really been more pro-Israel than many American Jews have been. So, yeah, but this is at historic levels, but it must be understood in terms of an international propaganda campaign very easily traced back to Russia, Iran, China, and Muslim Brotherhood entities. It is not hard to find the source of this stuff.
Okay, Trevor, I've come across a word that, if you wouldn't mind explaining what it means for me. What is the Red-Green Alliance behind the Hamas terror attack?
Well, the Red-Green Alliance is the alliance of communism and Islam. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood, which we've all heard about, was the father of Hamas. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood was founded in the 1920s with the help of the Egyptian Communist Party. So this alliance between Islam and communism has gone right back to the beginning. During the Cold War, the Palestine Liberation Organization, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, were openly pro-Marxist, Leninist, pro-Soviet, Soviet-backed organizations. And still today, we're finding Chinese and Russian backing for Hamas and Hezbollah and similar groups. Hezbollah works very closely with the communists of Venezuela, works closely with the Russians, works closely with the Iranians. This is the evil empire all over again. This is Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Cuba, Nicaragua, all of Venezuela, all of these countries on the left-hand side of the axis. And their biggest targets are, of course, Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and the United States, which is why we have so much propaganda out there today, because these countries can't really win militarily. They can only win by dividing the West, by dividing NATO, by dividing America from Israel, by dividing Canada from the United States, all of this kind of thing, Taiwan from America. This is why we're seeing, and back in the old Soviet days, they were experts at disinformation, but they had to plant stories in newspapers. Now they just put them on the internet. Now they can put something on the internet at 2 o'clock from St. Petersburg, and it's all over America by 5 o'clock that night. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of people sitting in rooms coming up with fake news stories, often using real, the logos of real newspapers, fake news stories, and pumping it out 24/7. And if you know what to look for, it's very easy to identify. But most Americans are not trained in this. Most Americans, most Westerners don't really dig deep into the sources. And so this is the war against the West now is much more to do with disinformation. The Russian-Chinese war is much more to do with disinformation right now, setting us up for the kinetic stage later. And Israel right now is in the crosshairs. Israel is the number one target. They need to split Israel from the West. Israel is a very valuable Western ally. If they can destroy Israel, they control the Middle East. They control the Suez Canal. that will be a major victory for the international, for the what would you call it, the evil empire, Russia, China, Iran, etc. That is one of their main targets right now.
How would you say the Trump administration has approached countering anti-Semitism domestically and abroad?
Well, they're doing it with things like, they are sanctioning universities who allow anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish and anti-Israel feelings and protests on their soil, which is great, which is good. But the real source of this is Russia, Iran, China, Qatar, etc. And so the Trump administration is being tougher with Russia than it was, I must say, but it's still not very tough on China, and actually wants to do deals with Qatar, which is one of the main homes of the Muslim Brotherhood, and it is holding Israel back from finishing Hamas off. So I think the Trump administration's doing some things right here, but it's not getting to the root of the problem. The root of the anti-Semitic problem, which is seeping into the Republican Party, into the MAGA movement, into the evangelical churches of America, is allowing foreign propaganda to flood the internet completely unchecked. That is the real source of the problem, and that's not being addressed.
And just real quick, Trevor, do you think there is any way on the local level, the grassroots level, where communities can, sort of push back against this propaganda? What can regular people do?
Well, regular people can fly Israeli flags. Regular people can counter disinformation on the internet. Regular people can stand up courageously, because if you take a pro-Israel stand on the internet right now, you're going to get hammered. But realize this is bots, realize this is indoctrinated people, and the American people are still largely on the side of Israel. So, we got to be brave and courageous. And that's the thing that is most lacking now. People get intimidated when they get hammered on the internet or hammered on Facebook for saying something truthful or questioning the propaganda narrative. And so I would support these initiatives. You could hold local rallies, like the Ukrainian people have held rallies in support of Ukraine. You can hold, the Jews should be out there right now holding pro-Israel rallies. Absolutely. But then the problem is, in certain cities, you'll get left-wingers attacking them, and the local police will do nothing about it. So, but where you can, we should be very public about where we stand, standing up for what is right here. October 7th was a tragedy. As I said, it was Putin's birthday. Hamas was in Moscow a week before they did the attacks. We know that some of them were trained by Russians in northern Russia and possibly in Africa as well. So we need to understand this is not about anti-Semitism. This is about the global play of the evil empire versus the free West. And they're picking on Israel. They're picking on what they see as the weakest point right now. And we've got to stand against that. We have got to stand with our Western friends.
Okay, Trevor, well said. It's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Emotional pleas to free the hostages held by Hamas and end the war. These came on Capitol Hill today by a freed victim and lawmakers, including Representative Josh Gottheimer.
48 still remain hostage in Gaza, as I mentioned, including 2 Americans. It's hard to wrap your head around, but as Scripture tells us, you shall not stand by the shedding of your fellow's blood. We will not sit idly by, and we have not sat idly by since the 7th. We will do as we've done every day since. We will keep working until every last hostage is freed.
Congressman Gottheimer announced a bipartisan resolution in the House to condemn the atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7th. It also calls on Hamas to immediately surrender ceasefire and release all hostages. The bill also commits to ensuring humanitarian aid to Gaza. Gottheimer also announced bipartisan legislation to award the Congressional Gold Medal to the American hostages and victims of October 7th. A freed hostage, Ilana Gritsevsky, called on everyone to join in the fight for the hostages and against terrorism.
What happened to us could happen to anyone, anywhere. Terrorism, Hamas, does not respect borders or life. On 9/11, the world witnessed the horror of terrorism. And today, 7 on 10, Israel is facing its own 9/11. If we don't do nothing, tomorrow it could be another country. The people of the world do not stay silent. This is not just Israel. It's a fight for all of us. Let's stand together for freedom and justice.
Today marks exactly 2 years since the October 7th attack by Hamas terrorists. People in Israel and around the world are commemorating today, honoring the hundreds of victims who died. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has more on today's events.
People in Israel are holding ceremonies in various cities commemorating those killed and taken hostage by Hamas terrorists on October 7th, 2 years ago. Families of hostages and supporters gathered in Jerusalem, calling for the release of all those still held captive by Hamas in Gaza.
The war still goes on, and above all, we have 48 hostages who are still waiting to come home.
People also gathered in Tel Aviv at the location that's now known as the Hostage Square. A visitor from Australia who has family near Gaza recounts the tense hours after the October 7th attacks when she didn't hear from her family.
I think it took about 15 hours for us to hear from all our family members.
People around the globe are commemorating the 2-year anniversary of the attacks on Tuesday. Israeli flags are being placed on Brazil's famous Copacabana beach.
What makes me sad is to see that there are people supporting Hamas. For this reason, I fully support this protest.
Events are taking place as far away as Kenya in Africa.
Freedom for Israel! Kenya's for Israel!
People marched through the capital city of Nairobi on Tuesday, holding Israeli flags and pro-Israel banners.
The Palestinians must exist and coexist in peace under the flag of Israel.
Organizers say the protest aimed to promote peace and show support for Israel. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
Gaza peace talks continue as the region marks the second anniversary of the October 7th attack by Hamas. Joining us to discuss is David Wormser, Middle East Affairs Analyst for the Center for Security Policy and former Senior Advisor to Vice President Cheney on the Middle East and Strategic Affairs. David, good afternoon to you. To start off, can you describe how the peace talks are progressing in your view?
Well, they're going to start really seriously in a few hours and tomorrow morning because the heavy hitters are coming. Witkoff is coming from the United States on behalf of Trump, maybe Jared Kushner, and Ron Dermer, who's really the alter ego of the Prime Minister of Israel, comes to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Until now, there's been a lot of logistical discussions, and they've been moving ahead, which is why you see considerable optimism. But on the other hand, we've had statements from Hamas in the last 48 hours, especially the last 24 hours, that really raise questions whether they understand the deal the way the Israelis and the Americans understand the deal. They're trying to walk back its essence. The essence is that the hostages come out up front and then all sorts of other things begin to happen. And they're saying, no, the hostages don't come out up front. They come out piecemeal based on Israel's concessions being activated and asking for concessions Israel hasn't agreed to. So I think we see some real problems in the negotiations. On the main framework has not been fully set in a way that everybody agrees that it's the same thing for everybody. And we'll see in the next 24 hours. The Israelis are not going to wait much longer than a few days.
Okay, so on the issue of disarmament, do you think, how likely is it in your mind that Hamas will actually genuinely disarm?
I don't think it's very likely. They've said they won't disarm. They say they need at least some of their weapons, their defensive weapons. I think the missiles may be considered something they could give up. They don't have many left, but their small arms are critical for them because that allows them to stay in power. They can terrorize people, execute people, which they've been doing in large numbers, by the way, to keep loyalty and to fight off clans that really don't want Hamas to rule anymore and are more aligned with Israel. So it's very important for them to keep their weapons. So I don't think they're going to give it up, and they've said they won't give it up. And by the way, Hamas is not the only force here. Some of the hostages are held by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and they have said very clearly they're not giving up any weapons until Israel ceases to exist.
So you mentioned earlier that perhaps Hamas and Israel are not on the same page in terms of hostage release and this armament point as well. Do you think peace talks could fall apart based on these 2 points?
They could, but the big question is Hamas sort of breastbeating to try to get better terms, but in the end has no choice and gives in at the end if it's imposed on them? Or are these the genuine negotiating positions of Hamas, in which case we're probably within 48 to 60, 72 hours of a collapse of the talks and a resumption of the conflict? So it's really hard to tell. Given Hamas's history, these terms that they're demanding to change the deal that Netanyahu and Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump have agreed to, they are walking back in a way that is absolutely consistent with what they've demanded for 18 months and has led to this deadlock. So I'm not that optimistic that they're not serious. I mean, I think they may be serious about sticking to their demands, which would lead to a collapse.
Okay, what about the point that there is no agreement right now on the future governance structure of Gaza? How is that going to play out?
Well, that is one of the more dangerous clauses because there could be an agreement that then later becomes a major problem. I'll give you an example. Hamas can, and not example, the actual structure of what is going on. Hamas agrees to recede from ruling the government and instead joins a national unity technocratic structure. The only problem is there are agreements in place already between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, where that would be the arrangement and Hamas would be the power behind the throne, but the PLO would manage to be the face of the throne, which means it's a national unity government essentially under the control of Hamas. Hamas also demands, as one of its new demands, that Marwan Barghouti be released. Now, Marwan Barghouti would instantly become essentially the national leader of the Palestinians, and he's very closely aligned with the most radical forces in the West Bank and in Gaza, and great supporter of Hamas on October 7th. So that's something that essentially the Israelis would be trading an overt Hamas for a nice, a masked Hamas with an even, I don't want to say more dangerous, but equally dangerous leader at its helm. That's something that, we may see Israel and the United States agree to this and then 4 months later have buyers regret and say, no, that's not what we agreed to. We agreed that Hamas is out of power and here's Hamas back in power. And they're going to say, well, that's the will of the Palestinian people. And then you're in a really bad place in 4 months. So that's the danger of some of these unclear clauses.
So given all those points, what would you say is Hamas's game plan right now in face of this peace deal?
I think Hamas's game plan is to drag it out, maintain enough weapons to survive, derail the Israeli ability to hold their fire. Israel can only stay like a cocked trigger for so long. Its reserves need to go home. It needs to win or cut bait, or fish or cut bait. It can't sit there, and Hamas is just trying to drag it out and sort of mush this to avoid a clarity, yes or no, and which is of course the worst things for them. So because otherwise they face a very binary choice: either they give in to the terms as Israel and the United States have decided, which are a diplomatic elimination of Hamas, or they allow Israel to finish the war, in which case it's a military destruction of Hamas. They're trying to find a third way of surviving with their weapons and still having the power of terror over the Gazan population to rule.
So on the point of weapons, let's say Hamas, agrees to this peace deal and disarms. I mean, how do you enforce something like that? What's stopping Hamas from agreeing and then going back on its word?
Yeah, you see, that's another big thing. Well, if they keep their weapons, we'll see them, or some of them at least. And the United States today, under President Trump, said that they're going to hold everybody to the agreement once it's signed. So one would hope that anything visible like that would then be met with a very harsh response by the side that is being violated, namely, most likely the Israelis, after Hamas begins to walk back on its agreement. But that said, Hamas has tunnels all over the place still, and especially in areas Israel has not taken. They can hide these weapons for a year or two, let the dust settle, let the tension pass, and then bring them out again. Number one. Number two, who gets the weapons they disarm from? The Egyptians, the Palestinian Authority? If they get it, it's really under their control still. It's just, it's like giving your money to your brother. It's not really surrendering the money. It's still with somebody you trust who will give it back to you when you want it. So we have all these questions about disarmament. The only really certain disarmament would be as if Israel took over the Gaza Strip. And there are many Israelis who say this, that Israel should have continued and take over the entire Gaza Strip and then spend a year or two going tunnel by tunnel, house by house, block by block, grain of sand by grain of sand to find all the weapons and eliminate them. There are still missiles there. 3 missiles were shot today at Israel from Gaza.
Okay, David, let me give one more comment from you on the anniversary of October 7th. Do you think this anniversary has heightened the urgency of finding sustainable peace? How is the world viewing this attack 2 years later?
I think the world is tired of this war, and the world sees an urgency in wrapping it up. The Western countries do not like these constant demonstrations. A lot of Jews outside of Israel are nervous about the rising anti-Semitism that keeps cresting, further and further cresting, as this war drags on. And of course, everybody's worried about the human cost of the war. But on the other hand, there are the Israelis who were traumatized on October 7th. And their lesson from October 7th is don't cut corners on your defense. If it's not real, it's going to come back and bite you. So they don't want a fake resolution, a partial resolution, something to just kick the can down the road in a few years. They're after a true victory, which in their terms is defined as the stripping of any force in Gaza from any ability to launch another October 6th and threaten Israel as with Gaza as a launch pad, or by the way, the West Bank either. So Israel the people of Israel in a slightly different place than people outside of Israel because of what they've gone through starting on October 7th, which I remember I was there. I could see the trauma as it was unfolding.
Well, David, I've said this many times. Great insight from you. I really enjoy hearing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the long arm of the Chinese Communist Party reaching into the West to hide its human rights abuses and persecutions. NTD's Steve Lance sat down with Maria Chung, professor emeritus at the University of Manitoba, to talk about her recent appearance on Capitol Hill. The theme of the forum was Faith Under Siege, with a particular focus on China. Let's hear from her.
You've been studying human rights abuses for the past few decades when it comes to China. A lot of people, they think, China's economy is growing, we're seeing the architecture grow there and the skyscrapers going up, but yet there's still a tremendous problem when it comes to human rights. What have you found in your research?
I have done 2 major research projects on, especially on Falun Gong practitioners. So one was in Canada, and another one was across continents in US, in UK, and in Canada. And I look into their lived experiences of being persecuted in China, and also the implications of the torture that they experience. So I look into the psychological impacts of what they have experienced over the persecution in China.
Talk to us about the scope and the scale of this persecution against the Falun Gong, and is this something that is still taking place as we speak?
It definitely is taking place as we speak. In 1999, Jiang Zemin ordered a crackdown of Falun Gong, and
The dictator at the time.
The dictator at the time, yeah, and he ordered complete eradication of Falun Gong practitioners. The scale is large, and the scope definitely has a wide varieties of tactics and ways to eradicate the group. And it is not only eradicating the group in China, but also the Chinese Communist regime, the CCP, wanted to eradicate a group overseas, like outside China.
Because you talk about eradication, we're talking about forced labor, but also murder and torture. So with that said, have you seen sort of the extension of the long arm of the Chinese Communist Party coming into places like the United States?
Oh, absolutely. In North America, and all over the world. And we know that...
what are they doing?
From the consulate, there is a special unit that particularly surveillance over Falun Gong practitioners and also sabotage their activities. So these are seen in affidavit of high-level Chinese officials who were working at the embassy, like in Australia before. And so transnational repression for the Falun Gong community is not new. It started at the very beginning of the persecution, started with very defamative, demonizing propaganda messages against Falun Gong all over the world outside China. And the consulate themselves came out to hand out booklets and, defaming and demonizing the group. But later on, they got stronghold with the Chinese organizations, so there are proxies who already helping them to do these things, and the Chinese consulate just stay at the back and being more clandestine and more sophisticated strategies.
So in your own terms, what is Falun Gong?
Falun Gong is a peaceful spiritual practice that uphold truth, compassion, and tolerance. So it's a mind-body meditation practice and have practitioner upholding these principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance in their daily life. So it's very nonviolent and very peaceful and apolitical.
So what would lead the CCP to go after a group that practices truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance peacefully?
Yeah, that reflects a lot of the nature of CCP. That first, when they found Falun Gong grew exponentially in the 90s, that exceeded the Chinese Communist Party members, because their official count, even though Falun Gong did not, and even today there is no membership, but they send undercover people to all the open sites in China and counted how many practitioners, and their official figure said 70 million. And the Falun Gong community said there were 100 million people were practicing Falun Gong at that time. So definitely it's a big group of citizens who are practicing something to change their heart. And CCP is based on Marxist-Leninist ideologies, and the leader, Jiang Zemin, when he learned that Falun Gong practitioner exceeded the CCP membership, he definitely was very jealous.
I mean, that's a staggering number. 100 million, that's more than a quarter of the United States population, all practicing this Buddhist-based meditation.
It's very popular, and because there's no membership, people just go out to the square and practice it after work or before they went to work. So lots of people found it is really healing their physical health, their mental health, and help them to be better person. So they really like it and becomes words of mouth. Many people practice it.
Professor Emeritus Maria Chung, really appreciate you joining us.
You're very welcome.
A rare scene that Chinese state media will never show the world. A drone light show turned into a drone rainstorm, sparking fires. This happened during the celebration of the 76th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party's takeover of power. On Chinese state media, you saw this during a light show last week. Drones carrying lights from the images in the sky, forming them, but this is what Chinese media will never show you. Also happening last week in a southern Chinese city. Hundreds of malfunctioning drones fell from the sky during a light show, throwing sparks and igniting ground fires. Embers rained down over the crowd like meteorites. People screamed in shock. Some spectators ran for cover, while others grabbed chairs to shield themselves from the falling sparks. Local authorities reported no injuries, but a resident said that many people were hit by the sparks. A huge supermoon lit up the night sky in cities across the world last night. This year's sighting lines up with the Mid-Autumn Festival, also called the Moon Festival. It's a day of celebration and reunion celebrated by ethnic Chinese across the world.
In the beginning, I thought because today is the Moon Festival, and it also coincides with the supermoon, we live at the foot of the hill, where we could already see the moon. I thought that the view up here would be much better than down there. In the end, after coming up here, we saw that the moon is really very big and full, really over my expectations.
It is clear that nature calls us to understand it and protect it. The moon has always accompanied human development, and observing it helped people organize time for planting and harvesting, plan travel, and measure time itself.
Also known as the harvest moon, it's a name given to a full moon that appears closest to the fall equinox and reached its peak overnight. According to NASA, the harvest moon can appear to be 30% brighter and up to 14% larger than a typical full moon.